very warm welcome to all of you in this lecture on facility design. If you remember, we have started the discussion on facility design. We have seen in the first lecture that if we have to place a facility at a particular geographical location, we have to consider a lot many factors. On the basis of those factors, we make a judicious decision that our facility or our plant would be located in this particular geographical area. We have also seen that once a particular area has been identified, we have to make a decision that what should be the location of the various plant facilities within the plant. For example, the location of the machines, that where we are going to place our machines, in which pattern we are going to place our machines, in which we saw three important types of layouts. For example, the product layout, the process layout and the fixed position layout. In today's lecture, we would like to focus on certain details related to the selection of a position or a selection of a locality for establishing our unit, or we can say establishing our plant facility or establishing our service facility. We have to see that the major aim of any organization is the maximization of the profit. So, for profit maximization, we have to take into account the money that we are investing into the facility or the plant. So, if the returns that we get from that plant or facility are more than the money that we have invested in that, we say that yes, we have made some profit from this investment. Similarly, this problem of choosing a proper location of establishing a plant facility or establishing a service facility in a particular geographical area is also same type of a problem. So, let us see that what are the various types of costs involved in setting up a facility or in transforming a raw material to the final product. Now, on the very first slide, we will see this problem of minimization of the costs, or we can say maximization of the profit. On your screen, you can see these are the costs affecting the location choice. Now, what are the costs? Initially, let us see that there are certain inputs, those goes to the processing unit or the plant or the factory, and then we have a certain products that are produced as an output of this process technology, which are then put into the market. So, the market is the geographical distribution of potential customers. So, geographically people are distributed in, we can say, in different zones in a country or different states in a country. So, the geographical distribution of the probable customers is there, that we can say that this is the market that we are tapping, or the products have to be supplied in this particular market to the specific customers or the consumers. So, there is a input. Now, what is the input? So, the input basically is the human resource. People would be required to carry forward this transformation process from raw material to the final product. Natural resources may be required, maybe it may be in terms of materials, it may be in terms of energy, maybe sometimes we generate electricity using coal. So, coal may be one of the natural resources that is available from the mines. Then certain kinds of energy is required, that is also an input parameter. Now, energy can be in terms of hydel energy, it can be in terms of electrical energy. So, different types of energy requirements are there. So, all these are the input parameters. Then there may be other input parameters such as the consultancy, that is the expertise in a particular field available, and then the subcontractors. Sometimes it is so happening, or it may happen that whatever we are doing, our process is dependent upon a number of other small industries or small scale industry. So, we have to subcontract some of our work to these people, so that they are helpful to us in making our final product. For example, ours is an assembly line in which we are assembling 50 different sub-assemblies to make a final product. And out of these 50 sub-assemblies, we are manufacturing 25 sub-assemblies ourselves, and 25 sub-assemblies we have given to subcontractors or to our vendors who are manufacturing them for us. So we have to, whenever we are selecting a particular location for setting up our plant facility, we have to see these subcontractors also. So this would also be a kind of a input to our process technology. So process technology basically means the transformation process. It can be any process in which we are transforming the raw material, that is the natural resources, into the final product which is being then sent into the market. So this is basically a bigger problem which has to be solved for maximization of profit and minimization of costs involved. So some input supply costs will be involved. All these things that you are seeing on your screen, human resources, natural resources, consultancy, subcontractors, all this would be the input cost, or this would be the input supply cost. So some cost would be involved at this level of the transformation process, or this would add up to a particular cost. Then we have the process technology, or we have certain set of machines which are transforming the raw material or the input into the final product. So certain money would also be required at this particular point. So what is the money that is required? That is the processing cost. So some cost is involved in transforming the raw material from here to the final product for the distribution or for the customer. So there would be some processing cost also involved. Similarly, when we come to the market, geographical distribution of potential customers, that we can call in a single word as the market, then we would have a distribution cost. Like the product is ready at this stage or at the output of the process technology stage, the raw material has been converted by this process into the final product which is now ready to be used by the customers or the consumers. Now this has to be distributed to different geographical locations. Then we have to take a decision that this cost should be minimum, or the distribution cost should be minimum. So whenever we have to take a decision regarding placing of our plant or facility at a particular location, we have to minimize all these costs. How these can be minimized? That different types of techniques can be used for that particular purpose. What is the purpose? The minimization of the total cost or the maximization of the profit. So we have to select a particular location for setting up this process technology so that the input supply cost is minimized. Because what is going to happen whenever a process technology or a factory is there, it is buying some raw materials from the vendors. Now these vendors would be supplying the raw material to the factory at a particular rate. So that rate would be dependent upon the type of transportation that is required. So all those things will play a very important role in minimizing the total cost. There may be so many different vendors available for the raw material. So a decision has to be made that which vendor to be chosen so that the input supply cost is minimized. So this is one problem. Then the second problem is the distribution, that is the distribution cost. Now we have different geographical locations at which we have to supply our raw material, the final product through the distributors. So the final product is going to one geographical location, second geographical location, third geographical location, and we have number of distributors for these geographical locations. Maybe for north we have a distributor, for south we have a distributor, for east we have a distributor, for west we may have a different distributor. So there are different distributors, and then they have the retailers who are selling the final product. So this distribution cost has to be minimized. We have to judiciously place our distribution centers so that the cost is minimized. Which cost is minimized? The distribution cost is minimized. Similarly, if we come on to the process technology which is transforming the raw material into the final product, there also cost is involved. What is that cost? That cost is the processing cost. We want to minimize that cost. Let us take an example. Suppose the process technology requires a temperature of 10 degree to be maintained in each and every shop. If we place our plant at such a position or such a geographical location where the temperature ranges from 8 degree to 12 degree only, it would be easier for us to maintain the level of 10 degree centigrade temperature. But if we place our manufacturing facility at a location where the temperature varies from 4 degree to 45 degrees, then we have to have a facility to maintain the temperature at 10 degree centigrade, which would add to the cost of the plant. So judicious selection of a plant taking into account the requirements of the processing would also minimize the processing cost. So all these three costs, maybe the cost for buying the material from the vendor, the cost of distributing the final product into the market, and the cost of processing the raw material into the final product. When these three costs can be minimized, in that case we would be able to save a huge amount of money, which would result into the profit. So with this simple diagram, we have seen that how we can make profit if we are able to minimize these three different costs. But it is not as simple as depicted in this diagram. There are so many different factors that have to be considered. So those different factors, when we consider them judiciously, when we give adequate weightage to those factors, would lead us into profit maximization. Some of them are there on your screen if you have given attention. There are other constraints as well, which can be social, legal, political. So all this we have discussed in detail in our lecture 1 on facility design. So we can conclude from this diagram that we have to maximize the profit and minimize the cost, and thereby we have to select a location judiciously, which would minimize the total cost. Now let's see that what is the procedure for selecting a location. In the previous slide we have seen that the judicious selection of location is very important in minimizing the total cost and maximizing the profit. So the procedure for selecting a location is divided into different phases. It starts from phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3. Maybe stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3. Phase 1 and phase 2 are the different phases of stage 1 itself. So let me again repeat this. Procedure for selecting a location is in different stages: stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3. Similarly, now we are going to see that what are the different phases in each and every stage. Now we will take a decision that initially, if you remember, in the very first lecture I have told that whenever we have to make a house, we have to first make a judicious selection that in which zone I am going to settle. The zone may be north zone, south zone, east zone, west zone of a particular country. So when the zone has been selected, then we will select a particular geographical area or a particular state, and when the state has been selected, we will select a particular town or a city. When city has been selected, within the city we have to go down to a particular area where we can afford to buy a house or buy a piece of land on which we can construct our house. So all these decisions have to be taken one after the other. So there are certain set guidelines which help us to make these decisions judiciously. So let us now see that what is the procedure. I have illustrated a very simple, I have given a very simple procedure for finalizing the housing problem. But here, whenever we have to decide setting up of a plant or setting up of a factory, we have to take a procedure, we have to follow a procedure which would help us to judiciously select the most optimal location. Now let us see what is the phase 1. Phase 1 of the procedure for selecting a location is the preliminary feasibility study or the study of the environmental conditions. If you remember, in the previous slide also I have told that environmental conditions play a very important role. So that we have to take into account. So whenever we take into account the environmental conditions, we would be able to generate a substantial amount of profit for our company. And what will this result into? This will result into the assessment of need for further study. So we will do a very preliminary study or a feasibility study that yes, according to environmental conditions, this geographical area is fine for us. We can set our plant in such and such location. And then this would help us in doing the assessment need for further study. If we feel that geographically this area is not suitable for setting up our plant facility, in that case we will say yes, assessment is poor, we are not going to set up a plant in such and such location. Let us find out some other locations for setting up of a plant. So this would help us, the preliminary investigation would help us to take a decision that is there a need for more detailed analysis. If there is a need for more detailed analysis, then we will go to the subsequent steps. If there is no need for subsequent analysis, then we will stop there and we will start searching for other geographical locations or other communities where we can set the plant. So phase 1 maybe we will repeat, because these are the different phases that we need to understand. Phase 1 tells us the preliminary feasibility study, whether the location or the area that we are trying to focus is feasible according to the environmental conditions or not. Then we do the assessment that okay, further assessment is required or not. Is there a need for more detailed analysis? We have to take a decision. Answer can be either yes or no. If it is no, I have already told no need to go for further analysis. If it is yes, then what we have to do? Let us see that. Procedure for selecting a location. Phase 2, stage 1. Now this is now phase 2 of stage 1. Initially we have seen phase 1 of stage 1. Analyze general characteristics of candidate regions. Now from environmental point of view, a feasibility study has been carried out, in which we have identified that yes, this area can be used for setting up of the plant facility, or area means a very big geographical location has been identified, in which there may be different candidate regions in which we can set up the plant facility. So from a very bigger domain, now we have come on to a specific domain. Now within that domain also we have certain candidate locations which we have to finalize, that which would be giving us the minimum cost and the maximum profit. Then how we are going to make this decision? These decisions will be made on the basis of projected capacity requirements. Now we have to take a decision that what are the projected capacity requirements. If you remember the lecture on capacity planning, we have seen that there is economies of scale, there are diseconomies of scale. We have to see that whether we need to have a single plant manufacturing a huge volume, or we have to have a distributed capacity or distributed centers or distributed factories, maybe 4 factories or 5 factories producing a certain amount of products and distributing to their specific market segments. So we have to take a decision regarding the projected capacity requirements. Now what would be the advantage if we have only a single factory, a very big manufacturing facility or a very big factory which is catering to the need of a huge amount of geographical area? The major advantage, if you could remember, is economies of scale, because the overall money that we have invested in that particular facility or setting up of that very big factory would be divided into the number of products or the volume of products that we are producing. So the cost of product may come down. But on the other hand, on the contrary, if we have 5 different factories producing the same product and distributing it to the consumers in their neighborhood, then we have to see that how much money we have to invest in setting up of 5 different factories and how much money we are saving by putting the factories close to the consumer. In the first case, when only one big factory is there, the distribution costs would be higher because the factory is located at one position, and then from here we are distributing to all the consumers on or in all the different locations. But when we have 5 different factories, the distribution costs may be reduced, but we have to make a trade-off that in which particular scenario we are making more profit. So this is also a decision that has to be taken when we adopt the procedure for selecting a location. So projected capacity requirements is one important thing. Second thing is the economic factors, that is the profit and loss factors that we have to take into account. How much would be the distribution cost, how much would be the variable cost, how much would be the fixed cost, all those factors have to be taken into account. Then the demographic variables, the distribution of population, which type of population is staying in which type of areas, what is the kind of demand being generated and the different demographic zones. So all those things have to be taken into account. Then legal and other constraints also have to be taken into account. So in phase 1 we have seen that we are only doing the preliminary investigation from the environmental conditions point of view, and we have just justified that okay, we are going to further go ahead with this particular area. In within that area also we have number of candidate regions on which we have to make a decision that which would give us the best result. So for different candidate regions we are analyzing certain general characteristics which are there on your screen. First general characteristic that we have analyzed is the projected capacity requirements, then the economic factors we have seen, demographic variables we have seen, and legal and other constraints also we have seen. So when we have to make a selection, stage 1, there are 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. After this, what would be the results that we have got? The results are selection of acceptable regions. Now within the candidate regions there would be some regions which would be acceptable to us on the basis of those factors which we have already considered. There would be some regions which would be outrightly rejected, that okay, economically it is not justifiable to place a plant in such and such location, or demographic variables do not insist or do not persist on setting up of a plant in this particular location. So some locations would be rejected, some locations would be accepted. So selection of acceptable regions would be done after the phase 2 of stage 1. Then we would also be able to justify whether we have to go for a centralized or a decentralized plant capacity. That means that whether we are going to place our plant at one particular location, or it is going to be a very big plant facility, or it is going to be a distributed facility spread over 5 different locations, maybe decentralized, in which we have 5 different factories catering to the need of the local customer. So this would also help us to take a decision judiciously. Should we go for a centralized facility or should we go for a distributed facility? So 2 points, 2 answers we have got. What are those 2 answers? First one is the selection of the acceptable regions, and second one is the centralized or decentralized plant capacity, and third one is the production cost. So after doing the phase 2 of stage 1, we have got 3 different answers. We also know that what are going to be the production costs involved. So we know that what is going to be the acceptable region, whether it is going to be a distributed or a single plant capacity, or what are going to be the production costs. So why production costs are important? Because we want to minimize these costs in order to maximize the profit. So after doing a judicious analysis of all these factors which are there on your screen, we would be able to identify that this is going to be the minimum production cost if we choose such and such location. Now we will see that it is very easy to say that we will consider all these factors and we would be able to achieve these results, but there is a substantial amount of information that would be required in order to carry out this type of a analysis. So what would be the information or data that is required in order to make such type of an analysis, that we are going to see in the subsequent slides. Now this is the data needed to select a suitable region. So there are different candidate regions, we have to select a suitable region. Now what is the Data, what is the information that is required? Let us see that information. Future increase in demand by region translated into productive capacity requirements. So future increase in demand means that we have to have a sales forecast data, that this is going to be the sales forecast for another 5 years, for another 10 years, and then we have to see that what is the productive capacity requirements. What do we, how much we need to produce, how much is the requirement in the market, what is the demand in the market, all that has to be taken care of, or all this data has to be available with us when we have to take a decision regarding the location of a suitable region, or regarding the location of a particular plant facility. We have to select a suitable region where to set up a plant facility. So we need to have a sales forecast data available with us, that is going to indicate a future increase in demand. So this would be translated into the productive capacity requirement. So what are the capacity requirements required to meet that demand which is there in the market? Then cost relationships for production and distribution. We have already seen in the very first slide today that there are certain inputs which are transformed by the process technology into the final products, and these products are then finally distributed in the market. So we have to minimize the distribution cost, we have to minimize the input cost as well as the producing cost. So when these three costs are minimized, our overall location of the plant is justified. Then cost relationships for production and distribution have to be studied, or we need to have information regarding these things, or these two important points. The third point is identification of sources of needed production inputs. Now for production we require a certain amount of input also. Now what is that input? We need to have information regarding the raw materials. What is the quality that is required, what is the quantity that is required, what is the cost of raw materials, what is the reliability. How this is going to influence our decisions, we can just take a simple example, that for a raw material the cost may be different in different states of the country. Same raw material may be costing less in one particular state and it may be costing more in some other state or some other particular state. Then we have to take a judicious decision that the raw material is cheaper in such and such state, why not to do the feasibility analysis of setting up our plant in that particular state. So raw materials, we have to see that what is the quality of raw material available, maybe the quality may be different in different areas of the country. So we have to see that what is the quality available, what is the quantity available, and the costs already I have told. Quantity also is very, very important. And then finally the reliability. Somewhere doing the risk analysis we find out that the vendors are very, very reliable. All the time you place an order, you are bound to get the raw materials at a specific date on a specific time, but there may be a region in which the reliability is very, very poor, or the transportation is not available, or the transportation is very, very risky. So all this information should be available with us when we have to make a decision that this is the area in which we are going to place our facility. So within the candidate regions, whenever we have to select a particular candidate or a particular location, we have to have information regarding all these points. So we have seen that sales forecasts are important, identification of sources of needed production inputs, that is raw materials, we have already seen. Then the labor market also very, very important, whether we have the available skills in that particular region. Suppose we want to set up a software company. We are not going to set up a software company in a region where there are no software engineers available with us. And if no software engineers are available, we have to get the software engineers from some other location, and then all their habitation costs have to be borne by the company. They would come, you have to bear for their housing, for their boarding, lodging, all that has to be taken care by the company, which would add to the cost to the company. So we would like to set up our software company in such an area where there is a plenty of skilled manpower available in terms of software. So available skills is one of the most important points. Then the wages. Already if you remember, we have seen in one of the lectures that if we want to set up a facility, we would always like to set up the facility in such an area where the prevailing wages are not very high. Because the wages or the money that we pay to our workers is going to add up into the cost of the product. So we want to minimize the cost of the product to be competitive in the market. So we have to take into account the prevailing wages. So we may choose an area where the wages are less, or we have to pay less wages to get the similar kind of work done. And then the supply levels also is very, very important. So skills, the money we have to pay, and the adequacy or the supply of the labor, that is very, very important. So these factors, why we are seeing these factors? Because these are the factors which would help us, which would guide us in making a judicious selection of a particular region in a big geographical domain. So these are the first two parameters that we have to take into account. Then there are other parameters such as supporting systems, that is economic infrastructure for supplying. Now two things already we have seen: raw material, its quality, quantity, cost, reliability. We have seen labor, adequate skills are required, proper supply levels of labor are required, the wages should be less. So those two parameters, we can say raw material and the skills required of the manpower or the labor. Third parameter is the supporting systems. Now suppose we have the raw material very cheap, we have labor also, we have adequate skills also, but if we do not have the energy, water or transportation facilities available, they are of no use. So supporting systems also have to be in place, and these supporting systems have to be very efficient and effective. Now on your screen you can see the third point, supporting systems, that is economic infrastructure for supplying energy. Now energy should be available, different sources of energy can be there, adequacy and cost. Now whenever we have to choose a location, we can see that if we place our facility in a particular state, the cost of electricity may be less. But if we place the same facility in some other state, the cost of electricity may be higher. And this is a regular or a recurring cost which would always be there. If you are operating different number of machines, if you are operating the factory, energy would always be required. This would add up to the cost of the product. So sometimes this would be a sole criteria for making a decision regarding the optimal location of the plant. So energy should be available, maybe from different sources. Then it should be adequate also. It should not be such that in 24 hours we are only getting the power supply for 8 hours. Then for the remaining 16 hours our plant capacity would not be utilized. So capacity would be wasted, we can say. So we want that the power should always be available, that is adequacy of power. Then the sources of power should be there and the cost should be less. So when the optimization of all these three factors, that it is cheap also, it is available for the large period of time, and it is available from all different sources of energy, then we can say yes, this is an optimal location, because here we would have to spend less money for the same amount of power. The power is also available 24 hours a day, as well as if one source of power is not available, there are other sources of energy which are available. So this is a judicious location or judicious selection of a location for setting up a plant facility. Similarly, water, quality, quantity and cost. We have adequate quantity of water available, the quality of water is good, as well as the cost is also justifiable. Okay, this is going to have a bearing on our decision regarding the selection of a location. Then the transportation and communication network would also play a very important role. That is, we have to see that all the transportation modes are available, that is air, it can be railways, it can be road. So all different modes of transportation should be available. Then the communication network should be there, telephone lines should be easily available. So if we have information regarding all these factors, then we can very easily make a decision. But if we do not have the relevant information related to all these factors, we would not be able to take a decision that which particular location would be best for us and which particular location would give us the maximum profit. Also, we have to consider some other factors. Till now we have seen three important factors. The first factor was the materials or the raw materials. So, the second factor was the labor. Third factor is the supporting systems. There are other factors that have to be taken into account that you can see on your screen. So, we have to take into account the legal, social and political factors. So, this we have already discussed in detail in our previous lectures on facility design. So, we have to take into account legal, social and political factors as well. Also, we have to see the environmental considerations. So, in environmental considerations, we have pollution, climate and quality of life. So, if we see in this particular stage, when we have different candidate regions out of which we have to select the most optimal region, we require data of this particular type or this particular levels, which is going to help us in making a judicious selection. Now, continuing the procedure, we have seen stage 1. In stage 1, we had two phases, phase 1 and phase 2. And for phase 2, we need to do analysis of the general characteristics of the different candidate locations. And for that, we required the information or data regarding so many different factors. We have seen what are those different factors one by one. Now, let us come to stage 2. Now, stage 2, we have to determine the best location. Now, how this best location would be decided? This would be decided on the basis of economic factors and strategic impacts like competition and quality of the product. Now, in this particular case, if you remember in our previous discussion, we have already seen that there are different stages, stage 1, 2 and 3. Within stage 1, we have phase 1 and phase 2. In which we do initially a feasibility study, and then from among a number of candidate regions we have to select the best one. We have to see that what is going to be the capacity requirements, how much capacity would be developed, how much capacity is required. From those points we can say that already we have fixed up the processing costs, that this would be the cost which would be required for processing. Also, we have fixed up that this is going to be the raw material or the input cost. Now, the last type of cost that is left to be determined is the distribution cost. Already we have taken a decision regarding a plant facility. We know that this is going to be the input cost, this is going to be the production cost or the processing cost. Now, we have to optimize in stage 2 the distribution cost. We have to see that where we have to locate the facility so that the distribution cost is also minimized. So, from those candidate regions from which we have to do the selection, we are going to see that which particular location is, instead of not only optimizing the input as well as the processing cost, it also optimizes the distribution cost, because it has to be solved in totality, not in taking one particular factor at a time. If in a particular case the distribution cost is minimum, but the input and the processing costs are exorbitantly high, the location is of no use. Similarly, on the other hand, the raw material is easily available, but the processing costs are very high. Similarly, the distribution of the products is also very costly. There is no point in selecting that location. So, we have to make a judicious selection wherever the total cost is getting minimized. There we have to set up our plant. So, in this particular stage, our focus majorly is on the distribution cost. So, we determine the best locations or the best location on the basis of the economic factors, focusing on the distribution costs. Similarly, we have to also take into account the strategic impact. So, strategic impact means the competition and the quality. So, competition is also going to dictate our decision, is also going to direct our decision in a particular focus area or in a particular location. We need to understand that what the competitors are doing, where they are placed, what is their market segment, how they are doing, what is their market share. And then we have to take a decision that where should we be placed in order to outdo our competitors. Similarly, the quality also is going to play a very important role. Although quality in raw material, quality in the manpower, quality in the supporting system, although quality has to be incorporated at each and every step, but here also as a strategic impact we have to take into account the quality aspect as well, the quality of the product that we are manufacturing. So, what will this result into? Here we are trying to do the strategic analysis, we are trying to optimize the location on the basis of the economic factors. So, economic factors, here we are trying to optimize the cost or the distribution cost, and we are trying to find out the location from where we can distribute our final product in the most cost effective manner. So, what this is going to lead us into? This is going to lead us into the best area or community on the basis of the distribution cost. So, production costs already we have seen, if you remember in the previous stages, here the focus is on distribution cost. So, we have to see that on the basis of distribution cost which is going to be the best location, and best area or community has been identified. Now, let us go to the stage 3. Now, in stage 3 we have to evaluate the alternative site. So, we have got the best site from the production cost or from the environmental friendliness. We have got the best site from the distribution cost minimization. So, the location for which the distribution costs are minimum, that also we have identified. Now, we have to evaluate the alternative site. So, all these sites are available with us now. Now, we have to make a final decision. Now, the final decision is made in stage 3. Now, this decision would be based on certain objective factors and certain subjective factors. So, now based on the objective and subjective factors, we would be able to make a final decision that where to locate the facility. Now, this would result in the best site for new facilities. So, new facilities means that the procedure that we are following for choosing a appropriate location for setting up a facility is in the case where we are setting up a new facility. It is not a revamping of the old facility, it is the setting up of a new facility. So, you can see we have seen different stages, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 and different phases in the stages. In stage 1 there were 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2, and now we have come to the last stage, that is stage 3, and in which the final decision would be made based on certain objective and subjective factors. Now, what are these factors, or what is the information that is required, or what are the factors that we have to consider when we go for the final selection? Let us see the factors to be considered in selection of a community and a site for a new location. So, mind you, this is a new location. All these factors are considered when we are going to select a site or a community for a new location. So, the first point, I will divide this into 3 broad categories. Now, first is the projected requirements in production units. So, in this we will see human resources. What is the requirement of human resource? What is the type of human resource required? What are the skills required? What is the quantity required? How many in number they are required? So, first point is the projected requirements in production units or production inputs. So, inputs already we know, human resources we need to understand. Raw materials there we have already seen their quantity, quality, all these factors, their cost, reliability is going to dictate our final decision. So, the human resources, the raw materials, energy, water and other services, transportation and other facilities, physical space for planned facility and future expansion. So, these factors we have to take into account for the final selection. Initially the selections we have done, those were for minimizing the costs. Maybe the production cost should be less. We have considered economic factors, we have considered strategic factors. Now we have identified, we have closed down the domain. Now is very limited. Now within that selected domain we have to locate. We have reached to a particular area or a community. Now within the community we have to see that in which particular location we have to set our plant. Now within that closed domain, now we are going to consider all these factors. Now what are these factors? These factors, just again let us see: human resources, raw materials, energy, water and other services, transportation and other facilities, physical space for planned facility and future expansion. So now we have to see that this is the requirement, this is what we are going to produce, and we need so much of area for this particular plant. Maybe that may run into acres of land, that may run into hectares of land. So we have to identify that area, that this is the area that would be required. Now when we identify that area, we have to keep into mind that maybe after 5 years the future demand may expand, and when the demand would expand, we have to expand our capacity also. So when we have to expand our capacity, we should have the facility, or we should have that kind of space available with us to increase our facility or to increase our capacity. So future expansion also has to be taken into account whenever we decide on a particular point or a location to place our facility. It should not be such that we have decided on a position or an area within the city in which we do not have any control over our neighborhood. We cannot buy our adjacent land because already there is existing certain infrastructure there. So we have to take a judicious decision. We have to set up a plant, keep some space for future expansion also. Similarly, we have to keep into account many objective factors also. Those are the projected levels of annual demand. We have to take into account another 5 years, 10 years down the line, what is going to be the sales forecast or what is going to be the demand. We have to see projected annual operating cost. Now operating cost may be in terms of the manpower or the wages that we pay, the materials that we buy, the raw materials that we buy for transforming them into the final product. What is the cost? What is the transportation cost for that? What is the production cost? So what is this? All these operating costs we have to take into account. Then we have to take into account the cost for construction of new facilities. So whenever we think of setting up some new facilities within our plant, we have to see what would be the cost incurred in that particular area or that particular field. Then estimates of annual profits for successive years. Now what is going to be the profit? We know that we are going to sell our product at such and such rate. We know that what is going to be the demand. On the basis of that, we can say that this would be the profit that would be generated. Cost of purchasing site, that also has to be included. So whenever we are finalizing the location, we have to see that the projected requirements in production inputs, what are the production inputs, and then we have certain objective factors like the projected levels of annual demand, projected annual operating cost, cost for construction of new facilities, estimates of annual profits, cost of purchasing the site. So these all decisions would guide us in the right direction to hit the nail on its head and to choose the best or the most optimal location. In spite of doing an analysis of these two important points, there are certain subjective factors also that we have to consider. So what are these subjective factors? Those are there on your screen. So the subjective factors are existing laws that will affect the firm's activities. So there may be certain laws specific to that particular location that will be influencing the firm's activities. So those laws have to be considered. while selecting the plant facility or the location of the plant facility. Then the labor market characteristics have to be studied. Labor market characteristics means that the skills available, adequacy, the wages, all those things have to be considered. Then transportation networks also have to be considered. What modes of transportation are available? What is the kind of connectivity? Whether adequate number of goods trains or the aeroplanes are available, or roadways, what are the links, what are the highways that are available for dispatching the goods as well as for bringing the raw materials. So transportation networks also have to be considered. Then supporting infrastructure systems like power, telephone, water, waste treatment, all these have to be considered. The waste treatment is very important in today's scenario. We have to take into account that whatever waste is being produced out of the plant facility, what is the treatment that is required, what are the norms that are there for waste treatment in that particular location, that have to be considered in a very strong way. Because if we do not adhere to these waste treatment laws, the company may be shut down or the location may be stopped to produce for that particular product. So there are other infrastructural support systems also which we have to consider. Already we have seen power, telephone, water, waste treatment, etc. Then the community characteristics also have to be taken into account. Now the community characteristics means the population makeup, whether it is a completely rural area or a completely urban area, or there is a mix, or it is a metropolitan city, it is a cosmopolitan city. So the population makeup would also help us in making a selection for placing a facility at a particular point. Maybe suppose if we want to place our service facility, maybe a ATM in a particular city, we will see that what is the population makeup in that particular region. If all of the population is very well educated, they can use the ATM facility very well, then it is very appropriate to place that facility there. But if the people are not going to use it, then there is no point in setting up the facility, because it would not be used properly or adequately. So the population makeup is also going to help us in making a judicious decision regarding the location of the facility. Then attitudes, traditions, financial institutions, these are also going to help us in guide us in making a decision. Then the cultural activities, schools, recreation facilities available, quality of life, housing and other services. All these points are going to help us in making a judicious selection of the location at which we are going to set up our plant or our facility or our factory or our service center. So in today's lecture we have seen that it is very important to minimize the total costs of transforming the raw material into the final product. We have to choose a location at which the input cost is minimized, the cost of raw material, the transportation of raw material from the vendors to the factory. Similarly, the processing cost should also be minimum, that is the cost of transforming the raw material into the final product. And the third one, the distribution cost, that is the cost of distributing the final product to the consumers or distributing the finished product into the market to the customers, that cost should also be minimum. So whenever we are able to minimize the total cost, we are able to maximize the profit. Now we have also seen the procedure for selecting the appropriate location. So in this procedure we have seen that there are different stages, stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3, in which we take into account a large number of factors, and these factors guide us in the right direction towards the judicious selection of the location. In the subsequent lecture we will see that what are the methods for making such type of decisions. Thank you. you.